Good afternoon, everybody. It's so good to be here this afternoon. Happy Global Entrepreneurship Week. Yeah, it's Global Entrepreneurship Week. It's the week that we celebrate entrepreneurship and innovation and the value of entrepreneurship to economies. It can't be understated at all, the value of entrepreneurship to Jamaica, a small economy ourselves, that the large majority of our businesses are micro and small businesses, you know, and the largest employer, arguably, because we still have a lot of informality in this space, is our business sector. Yeah, there is our business sector, there is government, and there is what you call own account holders. Arguably, the group from which a number of our micro and small businesses unregistered are doing a thing, whatever you want to call it, but contributing nonetheless to our economy comes from. So our theme for the week is a really good theme, I think, and it focuses on export, the need for export. It focuses on the need for import substitution. Yeah, and we're going to get into all of that and to share with you all of those kind of exciting insights as to why we do what we do and what we hope to achieve this week. And to bring greetings generally is our CEO. Her name is synonymous with, she says with madness, but you have to be a little mad, don't it? To achieve stuff.
Mad and brave,
you have to be mad and brave to achieve stuff. But Ms. Valerie Vieira is our CEO, and I'm going to ask her at this point, before I go any further, to bring greetings.
Thanks, Harry. And on behalf of Team JBDC, I just want to thank our panelists for agreeing to share with us, you know, their experience and their knowledge this afternoon, and our participants, because the marriage, I have at least two, at least two. So we're happy that persons have decided, despite the waves in the atmosphere around us, to be sharing this afternoon. And as Harry says, Entrepreneurship Week is just a period when we focus globally on those persons who have seen that they have a product or a service which somebody or persons are willing and interested in purchasing. And it's a very inclusive, even though we focus on the MSMEs, it's a very inclusive. Caution are sort of basic to what we do and what we should be doing. And I'm looking forward to an informative, robust discussion to see how we can even kick off our GW program for the week. But of course, it's a focal point, but it's what we do every day, all year round. But a special week where we're celebrating those persons who have seen that this is an opportunity. So we're looking forward to, you know, some great discussion. And I know Harry will pose some questions and dig into people's brain and so on and so forth and get the excitement going.
Thank you very much, Ms. V. As she says, it's a celebration of, yes, it's a celebration of those persons, of those individuals who have decided that doing a business is the career of choice, of their career of choice. Entrepreneurship is the career of the millennium, really, you know. And we have been saying to our students who Ms. V and the team teaches at the University of the West Indies, that when you end your program, you don't write a resume, but you write a business plan.
Right.
So we need to morphing from resume to business plans, you know. So
sure.
So that's where we're at. But as Ms. V says, we do have a really experienced panel to dig into our theme for this afternoon. Our theme for the week of celebration is homegrown, reducing reliance on imports. And our theme for this discussion this afternoon is homegrown, reducing imports and increasing exports. So we're going to jump right into it and talk about what we're talking about here. What are we really talking about when we're talking about reducing imports and increasing export? And why do we need to talk about it? That is a rhetorical question by now, because we know that our trade deficit is significant and unfortunately heading in the wrong direction. And it's important because as a relatively low income economy, relatively, compared to our brothers and sisters in the Caribbean, and certainly Singapore and certainly other first world countries, we need to find a way to reverse that trend of a widening trade deficit, and how we do this is simply by reducing how much we import and increasing how much we export. But unfortunately, this simplicity in the way in which I have just said it is far from the truth when it comes to the reality of how to get that done, how it is happening. And it's important to understand perhaps why we have this wide trade gap to begin with. And then we understand what the challenge is to reduce that trade gap and what it is that we can do practically to move from one point to the other. I don't know if you know, but Jamaica is the second largest importer of agricultural products in the Caribbean. There's something wrong with that, no? Yeah. Because we're supposed to be almost the largest producer of agriculture in the region, just by if you think about just like land mass alone. And of course, our experience and our ability to produce quality agricultural stuff. But yet we are the second largest importer of agricultural and agricultural products from the US in the region. Only topping us is Dominican Republic, which is a problem, Manufacturing has similar challenges. Significant contribution to GDP, as you know, as our next speaker will share with you. But still, the amount of manufactured products that we export, really, if you take out the big ones like what my next speaker, one entity that my next speaker comes from, Grace Kennedy, and a couple of others, really and truly, it's not that significant. Yeah? It could be much better. We're doing okay in certain areas, but it could be much better. Yeah. So let's talk about that. Let's start our conversation by focusing on our manufacturing and production capacity for export. And to do this, we have with us the Vice President of the Jamaica Manufacturers and Exporters Association, and he's also the General Manager at one of Grace's manufacturing plants. He'll share that information with you. And I would like to invite him now, Mr. Andrew Wildish, to share with us his thoughts on what is required to increase manufacturing and production capacity for export. How much do we export, Andrew, and where are the opportunities to increase that export from our manufacturing sector? Andrew, your turn.
Thank you, Harold. So it's a pleasure to be on this live stream. The JMEA, as you're aware, really is an advocacy group to grow exports and to grow the manufacturing capabilities of Jamaica. And similar to what you're saying, when you look at the import to export ratios of not only the US and UK as our major trading partners, but also the entire CARICOM. Right now, Jamaica exports about $1 for every $4 that we import through CARICOM. And there really has to be a focus in the manufacturing sector to grow these exports. And when you look at the capacity, and capacity has so many meanings in terms of the capacity of a business to export, the capacity of a country to export. And why do people buy from us? It really comes down, I mean, it is so important that you have to have an economic framework and the systems here that facilitate production and export. Exporting to a market requires you to have a product that is first accepted in your own market. So import substitution as an entrepreneur, and Grace Kennedy as an entrepreneur company that started 100 years ago, is now a huge conglomerate, started as most of the individuals in this forum today. It started as a small business determined to grow and build Jamaica. But for exports, you really have to have a product that's accepted in your own market. You have to have goods and services, food or kind, that you can sell to your own market and is accepted by your own market. Then at that point in time, you start looking at how do I grow my capacity to manufacture this product to the external or export markets. And moving from a local company where you're selling a local product to an international company selling product internationally, any entrepreneur that discusses it is going to highlight there are huge hurdles along the way. Can your product sell in the market? Does it meet the quality requirements and the price points that are needed? Do you satisfy the packaging regime and the regulatory framework to sell into that market? And do you have customers globally? And so many SMEs in Jamaica, the JMA has found that so many SMEs in Jamaica first focus on the US and UK as export markets that have huge barriers to entrance, and there are a lot of hurdles to pass to get to these markets, where there's a feeling that CARICOM, because of the trade agreements that we have, the 8 islands in the CARICOM that have a similar population to Jamaica, but a GDP of 3 times that of Jamaica per capita, really are an opportunity for exports where people similar to us with similar taste profiles and similar cultures to us would be more apt to buying a Jamaican product exported through the CARICOM. So JMEA and how does JMEA work with SMEs is really an important focus, in that we recognize that the most important thing in growing export sales is having a product that's saleable, but also the huge barriers to finding distributors, research and marketing information, and also getting the product to the customer. So we have 3 programs, as I discussed: distribution pointer, where we work with SMEs to identify distributors in different regions; research market pointers, looking at your products and seeing where they may be available. And then we also introduced the Amazon workshop this year, where we're empowering SMEs to sell directly to the largest consumer-based platform in the world, where so many SMEs trying to get into export hit roadblocks going into these large conglomerates, where Amazon and e-commerce is a means that empowers people globally to get to customers globally. For the regulatory requirements of getting into food, especially in food exports that I've specialized in, BSJ, Bureau of Standards Jamaica, has done a lot of work with us in making sure that we have the products, the labeling requirements, labeling specifications, and the certification programs to allow a customer to export. And most importantly, with a micro business trying to grow, is cash flow. $1 in sales generally requires $3 in working capital. And to grow export sales, once you've hit a certain trajectory or market size in the local market, really requires a huge amount of focus on making sure that you maintain a positive cash flow in your overseas sales. Exim Bank has been an incredibly good resource for a lot of SMEs. JMEA has an MOU with Exim Bank to really encourage small and micro businesses to get working capital loans to assist in the export or the capacity for them to drive export sales. So export is a hard one. Export is one of those areas that the large conglomerates in Jamaica, as you said, have done very well in exports. And the products that we manufacture do well in exports. But exporting product from Jamaica is essential to grow Jamaica, but it's also something that entrepreneurs have to really work hard on in terms of developing export markets and getting there. 4 main takeaways from my standing and from my years of experience is use your local resources, use your BSJs, your Exim banks, your JMEAs, JBDCs. Don't only focus on the US, focus on sales to CARICOM. Maintain a positive cash flow. Don't run after sales unless you can generate cash from them. And then coming back to capacity, only grow your capacity to deliver when you've maxed out your current capacity. A lot of entrepreneurs focus first on the capacity to convert a raw material to a finished product in terms of equipments and buildings, and they focus on it before they've maxed it out. And when you look at the established organizations, capacity normally means your line is running 24 hours a day, 6 days a week, or 5 days a week, before you focus too much on putting additional capacity in. So, I mean, Harold, the export side is hard. And when you work with entrepreneurs, there's definitely a resource that individuals have to focus on trying to get to that market. And I think the most important thing is don't focus on the US market first. Focus on CARICOM. Focus on our trading partners. Focus on the people that are similar to us, and those markets are the easiest to get into. Back to you, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew. Critical points made, but let me ask you before I move on to our next guest. Do you think we have found, Andrew, our sweet spot in terms of export, manufacturing export, in terms of the products that we should be focusing on? Where do you think we have the most significant competitive advantage?
Jamaica being an island nation where we're actually importing a lot of our raw materials from outside of Jamaica and converting to finished product, similar to the Japanese economy that is driven primarily on adding value to manufactured goods. I don't think we've hit near our capacity. I mean, if you look at the manufacturing capacity in Jamaica 40 years ago, and those products we manufactured 40 years ago compared to now, our manufacturing as a percentage of GDP has dropped significantly in that time frame. The country has really focused, I think, and the governments have focused on having manufacturing sector in Jamaica being more competitive. But there's huge opportunities to manufacture for local import substitution and exports, and it's finding those niches in the sector that people can do it effectively, cost competitively. Food, obviously fashion, crafts. We haven't gotten to the big ones yet in terms of electronics and some of those larger opportunities that I think the Ministry of Industry and Commerce sees as real opportunities. For the current export products that we do export from Jamaica to manufacture, it's primarily domestic, diaspora based. and Jamaican flavors. So we do a great job manufacturing the jerks and the drinks and that kind of stuff and exporting those. But I think there's still a huge amount of opportunity for exports in other sectors.
Yeah. I agree with you 100%. Thanks again, Andrew, for your initial hearing. So I mentioned about the huge amount of imports that we do. The actual figure in 2021 was US $486.9 million in terms of what it is that we import, agricultural products that we import into Jamaica from just the United States of America alone. And that figure grew by 23% from the previous year. Jamaica has been known, certainly in the diaspora markets internationally, for export of primary products ethnic. What do we need to do more of, and how do we need to get more in the game? How do we need to close this huge growing import bill? And what are we doing right, first of all, and what are the things that we can improve on as it relates to agriculture? Our next speaker, her name is Ethne Miller-Simpson, and she's the chairman of the Women Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean. And I want her to talk about how do we secure the pot? How do we secure what it is that we have here, core in Jamaica, the land, our resources, and more in particular, how do we find our sweet spot in terms of what it is that we need to export, and perhaps how we need to go up the value chain a little bit, and just what it is that we have been doing right and what it is that we could do better. So welcome, Ethne. No stranger to JBDC, a longtime friend of JBDC, to share with us this afternoon.
Oh, thank you very much, Harold. And I'm going to be borrowing quite a bit from the previous presentation to sort of set a frame as to what we're going to talk about a little bit. So you've asked me to present some information as to how you secure this pot. And the minute you hear the word pot, you start asking yourself the question, so it's the food that we're eating, so that is all local. But of course, it's not just local that we're going to be talking about, it's also about exports. And, what does this securing of that pot really mean? Safe to say in the context of homegrown and looking at exports and imports. We're talking about food security, yes, but we're also talking about financial security, because that is implied, and maybe we won't be able to get too deep into that this evening or this afternoon, but that is something that we also do need to look at. Food security has a national collective profile, as well as a parochial local profile. And I will go so far as to say they're not mutually exclusive. Because if we secure one, or if we try to secure one, it stands to reason that you would automatically secure the other. So the question is, which one are you going to do first? Do you focus on feeding our 2.9 million people, making sure nobody goes hungry, and then think of exports, which I think is a logical way to do it based on what Andrew just presented, rather than saying, okay, we're just going to export, but we have issues feeding the population. So that's one of the first things to put on the table. Securing what we grow in our own backyards then, to better nourish and support ourselves and families, and or in our national food program led by the Ministry of Agriculture and the government. Let's assess then, what help we need to put in place to deliver this food security at either the local level or a national level. What help do we need? Which is a question that you asked. A few of the inputs are land ownership or access. And recently we've had lots of conversations in the media around that. The ability to afford another input such as seeds, land preparation. When you ask the average farmer, what is the cost, the preparation cost for a 1/4 acre of, sweet pepper, versus a half acre of sweet pepper, and then start really calculating, and I'm using that word calculating now, what your output is going to be, so that you can have a conversation with an Andrew, for instance, to say, you know, I'm only doing this year, but in 2-3 years time, I'll be able to do that, and then have a conversation about serious export. That is one of the things that is lacking, it's weak. Managing the process of planting, we put things into the soil, and then you leave it. You pray over it. And you expect that it is automatic. And then you pray for rain too. Well, we got a lot yesterday. Yeah. And then we try to figure out, okay, now, is that enough?
Yeah.
Is that really enough? The process of reaping, post-harvest loss. What does that look like for that 1/4 acre of sweet pepper? And I don't really want to touch the fertilizer issue, but that is one right in there. Let's jump to aggregation. Do we have enough aggregation centers? What does our national aggregation program look like, if we do have one? I know we have one. Yeah. Access to storage centers, access to local and national markets. And when you think in markets now, think of your community market as well as the markets that Andrew was just talking about. The sale and the purchase of food. The sale and the purchase of food. What's the process involved in that? As well as the guarantee that you can safely reap what you have planted. You've planted a 1/4 acre of sweet pepper. When it's time to reap, will you get a pepper? Because there's the issue of radial licensing, which we'll touch on. So where exactly are we in terms of Jamaica? And I'm going to pose a few questions. One, what is the size of our local market? Do we know? Do we have that data somewhere that we can actually access and know what is the size of the local market that leads into local consumption and food security, the health and nutrition that we talk about? Has this grown in the last 5 years? And what is the carrying capacity of our country? What is the true carrying capacity of the country versus the size of the export market? The growth, the projections, what do those look like? And not just the large figures, the big figures that we throw around, but when you start dissecting and saying, okay, for this sector, for that industry, these are what the numbers look like. If we're looking at tubers versus, exactly, do we have those figures? Another thing I want to put on the table now is acreage and the acres of arable land, and a land policy that encourages and enables and secures the interest of large and small farmers. I'll say that again, the acreage of arable land and a land policy that encourages, enables, and secures the interest of large farmers as well as small farmers. So if you go and you look for the data, you'll see, for example, we have 2.7 million acres of land and approximately 17% is arable. When you hear those numbers, clearly there's room and there's opportunity, which amounts to a little over 400,000 acres. The majority of these lands are located in the plains of St. Catherine, Clarendon, St. Elizabeth, and Westmoreland, with small strips on the north coast. When you look at the Census of Agriculture, it identified, this was 2007, the last data, identified approximately 326,000 hectares of land in farms. This represents actually a decline of about 81,000 hectares, representing just over 20% since 1996. So the numbers are going up and coming down and going up and coming down. And that, of course, is not the kind of pattern you really need when you start talking exports. Approximately 62% of the land in farming can be classified as active farmland. That is land allocated to crops and pasture. In relation to the parish distribution, I just wanted to share a little bit more detail. Clarendon really represents 14%. St. Catherine is at 12%. St. Anne Westmoreland is 11%. St. Elizabeth is about 11% as well. Manchester at 8%, and that rounds out the top 5 in how the parishes are allocated. So in terms of arable land, when you start promoting through JBDC, you need more women in agriculture, promoting to more youth and saying we need more young people in agriculture. Where are the young people in relation to the arable land? Where are our people in relation to the opportunities? And then after we have the national land policy, do we regionalize Jamaica? What is the parish policy and approach that we're taking? When we're talking to the farmers now on the ground and we're saying, okay, the type of the soil type that you have in a particular parish will grow X. Does that fit with the parish policy, the regional policy, or even your national policy and your export policy? Another point that I put on the table is, what is the productivity ratio by crop segment? Do we know that? Is that information readily available? I said earlier that, you know, just in talking, that one of the things that we want to put on the table as well, not just to look for in terms of analysis, but opportunity, is diverse financing. And I recently had a conversation with an agency outside of Jamaica, and we were looking at what the sector is presenting to us as entrepreneurs. It is presenting, for example, that we can get grants, which is fabulous, but it's not just grants. And I'm going to tell you why. The average entrepreneur will go ahead and access the grants that are available. The grants are specific, and they say to you, you can use that funding to purchase equipment, for argument's sake. But that entrepreneur, on the day when you give them that grant, is still having to figure out how to pay themselves, how to pay their bills, how to pay their staff. So there's a working capital issue. So I said to the person that I was talking with, you know, I said, you know, we need to try put together not just the grant opportunity, but the loan opportunities, and package them a little bit better, so that the entrepreneur doesn't necessarily have to be running around trying to find these things for themselves, but can actually go to a one-stop shop sort of outlet. In terms of the diverse financing as well, persons are going to come back and say, okay, we have issues with collateral, for example, which will come up in our conversation. How can we start using our association, such as our Caribbean, to help with that? We tested that recently during COVID, where we had a little partner plan sort of thing. And I know other associations have something similar. And it worked. People came to us and said, listen, we want to be a part of that. We had international agencies actually asking us, how did this work? How could we know, you know, amplify this? Because we have, let's say, 100 women who are part of our association. We actually know our 100 women. But when you get to a credit union level or a bank level, a commercial bank level, where they have thousands, it's a little different. Exactly. So, you know, how can you then use the association that knows it's 50 and it's 100 members for that part of the market? But then you have the commercial bank that is there for the other part of the market. Another thing that we need to look at is the number of farmers. I think we just about have under 200,000 farmers now, yet we only have about 90,000 registered formally on ABIS, which is the system that the RADA uses. We talk about inputs, the affordability, and that will come up later on. Opportunities in terms of aggregation and storage, the markets, and even creating some markets within a market, which I'll talk a little bit more later on. The last thing I'll point out here for us to consider is the whole issue of data banks and seed banks. Everybody wants us to be using research. Where do we go? Where do we go? When we need that information, where do we go? And as an entrepreneur, you spend so much time just chasing information rather than, as Andrew just pointed out, focusing on your actual product. So that then bleeds right into the issue of productivity. So this whole conversation that we're going to have this afternoon, you'll realize it really needs to pick up on so many things. And is there any one entity or two entities that are concentrating at that level?
Yeah. Thank you very much, Ethne. Some critical information, some thought-provoking information as well. So We'll talk some more before we're done this afternoon about some of the things, some of the stuff that you brought up. The whole business of having a supportive ecosystem is basically what you're saying, to ensure and to enable and to empower the entrepreneur in the agricultural sector, such that they can be able to deliver is very important. And so we're going to talk some more about that still when we go on. But thanks thanks for the contribution so far. So one of the industries, the sectors that JBDC has been known for and has been focusing on, apart from our agriculture and agro-based businesses, is the creative industries. The creative industries for us is a bedrock type set of industries. We believe it provides for us significant untapped potential and opportunities. But we have issues with the creative industry, which I'm sure our next guest will speak about. But we also have sweet spots with the creative industries. We have, as you know, arguably, and I will stand up anywhere and argue, the strongest brand per capita anywhere in the world. So that alone, we have the most sought after and popular lifestyle that persons crave to be a part of. And this yields creative industry. This yields and shouts the potential of our creative industry and so much more. We have such a rich culture and traditions in this country from which creative industries again spawn their products and their businesses. Not to mention that we're just good at being creative. we're just good at it. We can't help ourselves, we're just good at it. But there are similarities to the creative industries and the challenges that the creative industries have and agriculture. And one similarity is the level of informality that exists and perhaps a relative level of structure, relatively low level of structure within the entities within the creative industry.
Data management.
And the data management, if you can't count it, it don't exist. You know, so, but we can talk about all those things. But we are so happy to have with us another friend of the Jamaica Business Development Corporation, has been with us on several of these fora. And her name is no stranger to you as well. She's Kenia Linton George, and she's the founder of the Designers Guild. Can you talk to us, Kenia, about the power of our local design and our local prowess where that is concerned, to be able to translate that into a global product? And what are your thoughts generally on where we are as it relates to the creative industry, and of course, in particular, fashion, your baby?
Good afternoon, Harold, and good afternoon, everyone. So picking up on something Andrew said earlier before I go in, where he mentioned about trading regionally with CARICOM, I think back to the 60s to the 80s before globalization, when there were restrictions and we really traded more with the region. And when you look back at stores like Amar's and Joseph's, they were selling predominantly Jamaican-made clothing. And when they weren't selling Jamaican-made clothing, they were exporting to throughout the region. And then eventually they started selling fabrics and so forth. But, you know, probably 80% of their store was selling fabrics and then, you know, clothing. And then now, fast forward to today, you see most of these fabric stores are shifting towards selling imported finished goods, which is alarming for us designers. Just recently, I went into Ping's Fabric, and half of the floor had shifted to home goods that have been imported. And it's quite alarming to see that. And it causes us to pause and figure out what is happening and what we need to do to keep the industry alive. We do have a number of designers registered in the Designers Guild. The last forum we had over 100 members, and this is listed on our website. But the number is dwindling, and I find that's a problem because there's limited access to raw material, and when you stifle access to raw material, you stifle creativity. And I think that's one of the main issues we need to address in terms of raw material for persons who want to produce, manufacture, create. Now, low productivity in general can impact national income, and it's important for us to do everything we can to increase productivity in all sectors, especially, you know, manufacturing and the creative sector, or whether it's agriculture, so we have good food security. When you look at countries like China and Singapore, as Andrew mentioned earlier, and even Portugal, you look at China, 40 years ago, China was considered a poor nation. And now, to fast forward to today, they're one of the richest nations in the world. And this came about not because they just, you know, overnight decided to, you know, be the manufacturing capital of the world, but it took time. They started out first with agriculture, and then they transitioned from agriculture to manufacturing for export. And they had significant focus on tax incentives and setting up economic zones for export. And we've seen where we've tried that in Jamaica, where we have our economic zones and we had our free zone and so forth. And I think we need to revisit that, because there is power in having these economic zones and having tax incentives and so forth. Because if we don't produce, we're going to remain, you know, poor essentially. And we have to look at these other nations and look at how they've done it. We look at Portugal now. 20 years ago, Portugal wasn't producing half the amount of textiles in terms of accessories that they're producing now. You see where a number of companies are shifting their headquarters to Portugal. And it's just the government needs to put policy in place to say, this is what we're gonna commit to doing and actually stick to it. If we don't commit and stick to it, you know, we're gonna be all over the place and just importing and following what others are doing. So the first challenge we have in Jamaica, I see, is skill shortages. So we have a shortage of skilled labor because our labor force in garment manufacturing is aging. A number of my seamstresses are retiring right now, and some I have to be pulling back out of retirement. And the same thing is happening in Trinidad. Mailing and I spoke about it. She had to pull several of her seamstresses out of retirement because the young persons are hardly training to become seamstresses. And the few who are training, they are training to become designers because they want to run their own business. So we need a large scale training program to train seamstresses so that these designers will have workers. We have no workers right now. I recently closed my factory and I'm back trying to reopen since COVID. And it is dreadful trying to find staff. And now we're going to be starting up a training program, hopefully with JBDC soon. And that is, you know, the light at the end of the tunnel for a number of designers. There are so many designers waiting for this to happen because we have the markets. We have the creativity to put the designs out there and the demand is coming, but we can't fill it. We can't fill the orders that we're getting. And it's unfortunate. So it's not a lack of opportunity. It's not a lack of the market to sell to. It's a lack of the capacity to produce here and the investment in producing. And then other issues we have outside of skills is limited manufacturing companies, because more persons are shifting away from manufacturing and going into, you know, buying and selling and so forth. We have a lot of outdated equipment, so we do need a lot of assistance in terms of bringing in more high-tech equipment for manufacturing. We do struggle with high energy cost, and that we've been trying to address for years. And it will take investment if we're going to move to solar or anything that will be eco-friendly or, you know, energy saving. Lack of financial investments, poor quality control over the years, and just a number of these challenges. But if we look at, for instance, some of the opportunities in the industry, we are strategically located geographically. We're in the Americas. We are an English-speaking country. We have competitive labor prices, regardless of whether you try to compare us to China or some of these other cheaper countries in terms of labor. We are competitively priced. During COVID, when a number of these American brands could not get their orders out of Europe and China, they reached out to Jamaican designers and Jamaican small factories to see if they could get their samples done and small batches done. And when I told them the price, they asked, how much do you pay your staff per day? And what is the minimum wage in Jamaica? And when I told them, they were in shock, because compared to New York and LA, it's nothing. So if we are focusing on the right markets, we can compete in terms of the labor cost, because when they do the math, it is worth it to have their manufacturing in small batches done in Jamaica, rather than waiting for it to come from China and paying all of that in terms of, you know, the shipping and so forth. So it pencils out. And we've been in dialogue with a number of small design brands in the US who want to do small batch manufacturing in Jamaica and sample room in Jamaica. And that's a huge market for us that we haven't been able to tap into, because we don't have the trained labor force. And we now have an aging or an aged labor force, because a lot of these ladies were sewing from the 807 factories in the 80s. So they're much older now. They're 40 years old. They're like in their 60s and retiring now. We need to train more people, and we have such a vast talent. And that's the next one I had. You know, we have talented, trainable workforce, and we have untapped markets that we need to explore, because as you had said when you just started, Harold, brand Jamaica is the easiest brand to sell no matter where you go in the world. I just represented Jamaica in Africa in Kigali at Rwanda Fashion Week, and the reception was absolutely amazing. And a huge part of it was brand Jamaica. Everybody wanted to be around the Jamaican. And we don't understand how easy it is to sell anything in the world once you are Jamaican. And we have such talent. We just need to tap into it. And I'm closing off now so that we can go into our question and answer. But so regardless, if we look at our creative industry, whether it's clothing designers, accessory designers, ceramic, visual art, household items, soft furnishings, accent products, right now the focus is on sustainability, sustainable fashion, conscious fashion, eco fashion, circular fashion, low emissions, and just green, clean practices. And I think we are uniquely placed to take advantage of that. When I travel with my clothing, people want to buy it no matter how much it costs, because they know they can say this garment was made in Jamaica by Miss Winnie or Miss so-and-so from this factory, and they feel connected to the garment. They know where it came from. It's not coming out of some random fictitious factory from somewhere around the world. And we just need to focus on sustainability right now. We have to invest in businesses that can do repair, redesign, upcycling, rent and lease and swap in terms of sustainable fashion, because it's an untapped market, and we have outdone ourselves in terms of fast fashion, and we can't compete with fast fashion. So we have to look at the sustainable markets and compete in that niche, because that is where the power lies, in terms of looking at the raw materials we have that we can turn into, you know, products. When you look at how many fruit we all the waste in terms of whether it's mangoes or pineapple and so forth, you can make fabric from all of that. You can make fabric from banana. There's so many things we're not tapping into. And I mean, I won't get carried away into all of that, but we just need to figure out how to tap into the sustainable market where we can recycle, reuse, and just take advantage of this new era of sustainable fashion. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kenia. As usual, lots of nuggets for for us to chew on, for us to think about. You know, and I'm happy that you spoke about our competitive advantage in regards to manufacturing here in Jamaica for our fashion industry, because I was just coming from our retreat this week. And one of the subjects on the table, one of the discussion points on the table was about us outsourcing manufacturing and whether or not we should be going up the value chain and probably just be designers alone, you know, and just outsource the manufacturing to some damn rep or China or whatever it is, you know, and persons were positing that, you know, kind of profound way on the table.
No, it sounds practical, but no, we can still manufacture.
Absolutely, and we have competitive advantage.
Until we are exporting designs only and it surpasses manufacturing, I don't think we should try and say we're going to shift to that. It doesn't make sense.
And give away your intellectual property.
Anyhow, we are all in agreement on this panel on that matter, so we don't need to go down the road and none at all. All right, so thank you, Kenia. We're going to go into some conversation now. You have been listening to us for the last hour, listening to our three guests for the last hour. It's your time now to talk to us. I see some comments going on in the chat, great stuff. But if you want to make a comment or if you want to ask a question, I think the protocol is for you to raise your hand or just type it in the chat, and we'll get to you, and we'll want to, because we want to hear this thing named business dialogue. You know, dialogue, that means we have to talk, right? Right. So we really want this forum is about you. So we want to hear your thoughts on this. I saw a comment earlier, Calvert. Can you go up a little bit? Is it that? I would love my students to engage in something else. Yeah, great stuff, Vanessa. But something else was about that. No, that was it. No, I saw something about a question. There was a question.
On Jamaican products.
Okay, right. Okay, somebody, Abraham commented that we need to focus on Jamaican products to export. Good stuff. All right. So I'm going to initiate some conversation with our panelists until you get your thoughts together, and perhaps we'll stimulate some of those thoughts for questions as well. And my first kind of question for our panelists is about the where does the pendulum come down in terms of our competitive advantage in Jamaica as it relates to manufacturing goods or services? Where are we? Some persons say all the time that we were a goods producing economy, but now our services are far stronger than our goods producing industries. What are your thoughts on that, Andrew? And is it one or the other? How do we spend the $10 that we have in investment on one or the other, or should we make a choice? What are your thoughts on that, Andrew? And I'm going to ask Ethne, and then
sure.
Can you comment on that?
As Karina said, Jamaica is I'm a Jamaican. I'm born, bred here, and lived here my whole life, and we are an incredibly dynamic people. And it takes a dream and the courage to do it, to make it happen. And I don't think a government or a policy can set what are the winners or losers and what industries are going to win. I think entrepreneurs will get up and fight, and they'll fight every day till they succeed. And Jamaica is known for that. Jamaica is known for having the best runners, the best music players. And when we as a people believe that we can be the best manufacturers, And when we as a people believe that we can tackle the world in any way, shape, or form is when we'll actually succeed it. And its story over and over again is, you listen to stories about the successes that the individuals have made. I mean, you have huge corporations that started as entrepreneurs, and you have new businesses to growing at phenomenal rates right now. And I don't think that we can, in answering your question, I don't think we should choose the industry. I think as a country, we have to have the systems in place to support fledgling businesses. Labor is an issue. Karina stated it in the apparel industry, in the food manufacturing industry, and all the manufacturing and service industries in Jamaica. Skilled labor is running short. Ideas are not short. There are 1,000 ideas, and it takes the individuals with the courage. It takes policies by a government and a whole set of resources to allow entrepreneurs to build business. And when we look at some of these other success stories around the world, a lot of it is not the success story of the government choosing the winners or the losers, but it's a success story about having policies and infrastructure in place that allow the entrepreneurs to have an idea and convert that idea to a business and be successful in that area.
Good. I agree with you, but again, it's a conversation that I hear all over the place in corridors of policy and otherwise, you know. So I'm going to ask you, Ethne, the same question. Do we choose a winner like I hear some countries have done in terms of what it is, you know, what we should focus our small and slim amount of resources on? And how do we do that? And if we do, if you agree with that.
Well, my comment is to sort of ask some questions.
Yeah.
So, number one, if we stay the same, won't we always have the same results? Are we satisfied with the results that we have? If the answer is no, then clearly there must be some kind of change. If it is that we have now agreed that we are going to make some changes, what changes do we now need to make? I listened to Kenya's comments and I'm excited by quite a few things that you've said, and I want to put them in this direction and work backwards. So I like going to the end of a line and saying, okay, what if we dream, you know, what would we dream? If you had a vision, what would it be? If Kenya could close her eyes tonight and wake up tomorrow morning and open her eyes and her dream was there standing in front of her of the Jamaica fashion brand, what would it be? How would it look? How would that success really manifest itself tomorrow morning? And then you take that and you map your way back to say, okay, to make that happen, here's what is now required. So I don't think it's a case of just getting up and making a change and saying, we're going to choose this or choose that. It is really having a plan. It is really looking at where we want to be as an economy, as a country in the next 5, 10, 15 years, and then build your way backwards. Yeah. Because as I listened, I realized that almost everything that we've talked about this evening or this afternoon is built on agriculture and education. It's built on agriculture and education. So I go back to something that I said, what exactly is our agriculture policy or land policy? Is it an accommodating one? What is our education policy? One of the persons online just asked the question, they would love to be a part of this. They would want their students to be involved in something like this. Now, immediately thinking as an entrepreneur, that's an opportunity to say, okay, what format could it take to involve what level of students? Is it primary level student? Is it secondary? Is it tertiary? And then to sit as a JBDC, I sound like Miss V over here, right? And then put the curriculum together that meets a particular need. Sometimes we sit and we plan things in a vacuum, you know.
Most time.
And then we think that it's going to just fit the market. It is not going to work that way. So thinking as someone who is in agriculture, we have land that we have not yet started using. Kenya just said we can make clothing from banana. We knew this from a long time. We have purses. That's fiber, exactly. Fiber. You know, so is there now a value on that particular product? Is there a value on the fiber, purse and clutch? And there is. Exactly. Because sometimes what is happening, you know, is that the students, the young people, do not hear the value. They don't see the value. So as a result, they think there is no value.
Yeah.
So if we start from that end and build the value around that product,
Yeah.
you might be surprised at what happens after.
Yeah.
The other question I wanted to ask is, going to talent and labor, is there a value on being a seamstress? I remember sitting down and watching, I think it's Project Runway, is it Heidi Klum's show on cable or whatever? And I was fascinated that season when they gave the participants some tablets, some HP that they could actually design their own fabric and then print their own fabric. If you said to a Jamaican child doing art at Knox high school or community college and then say to them, come up with a fabric, what would that fabric look like? Or St. Hugh's or Westwood or, you know, what would that fabric look like? Are we actually then pairing and putting the ideas together with the manufacturers and then building our pipelines accordingly so that a Kenya could have the fabric that she wants from the banana trash or the banana leaf or the pineapple skin or so on, and then putting the education support under all of that. So it is really sitting down and thinking this stuff through and then saying, okay, so it means that we need more bananas grown in which part of the country? How many acres of land are we going to now put into that kind of production just to support the fashion industry that we are building in Jamaica?
Well, I want to support that, Harry, because you know, and we invite people to come visit with us come Wednesday to see what we're doing in terms of textile printing and developing our cottage industry.
Right.
I think that what we have seen over the years is that having an idea and not putting the ecosystem support in place.
Precisely.
That's the difference why Aunt Jemima pancake make it to the world and Miss Lou in Malu in Moko with a wonderful gluten-free pancake mix don't make it because there is no support system, the full value chain to make sure that that happens.
Right.
And this is when we come to respect what you just said, respect each industry
Yes.
as a real business.
Yes.
And give the proper support to make it happen.
Yeah, I want to concur with that conversation. I wanted to talk about that because you brought it up earlier. Kenia brought it up as well, and Andrea alluded to it, and Ms. Vino nailed it in terms of the ecosystem of support that is required to drive an industry, you know, and it's a complete value chain of consideration that needs to happen all the way back to the primary product. I mean, if you think about a craft industry, for instance, first of all, is that an oxymoron? do we in fact have a craft industry, you know, in and of itself, if you think about it? Because if you're thinking about, say, a craft industry and what constitutes a craft or even fashion industry, you have to start exactly from the base raw material in crafts, in sense of craft. You're talking about an agricultural product. Do we grow the hemp? Do we grow the sisal? Do we grow the particular type of wood for the purpose of that? And is that activity a viable activity in and of itself to sustain the industry itself? Because to sustain an industry, a prosperous industry, all the nodes of the value chain has to be built out and has to have viable business propositions in there. The transportation of the bamboo from the field to the factory, for instance, must be a viable proposition for somebody to take on as a business for it to continue in its perpetuity towards a successful model. So my question to you, Kenia, is about that ecosystem around the fashion industry itself. What are your thoughts on it? Yes, we are having, as Lee says, and it's a good time to share with the audience that we are having on Wednesday the second event of our Global Entrepreneurship Week, Festival of the Cloth, where we will be having on display for the whole day a gallery of hand-produced batik and tie and dye fabric in commercial quantities. We inviting our design community and the community at large, because it and of itself can be a product, but of course it can be an input to for a fashion designer to take further into the market. But Kania, what are your thoughts on what perhaps specifically what we would need to be focusing on to build out that supportive ecosystem around the fashion industry that is not presently there? How can we strengthen that? And what do we need to zero in on to strengthen the ecosystem around the fashion industry to make it a viable proposition? To make it for instance, if you think about thinking that you want to be a fashion designer, that there's a clear route to market, for instance, for you.
So what JBDC is doing now is crucial in terms of what you're doing in the textile department, in terms of the batik fabrics and so forth. It's excellent, because having control over your fabric design is an incredible part of the whole, process of fashion designing, because a lot of the fabrics that our designers work with locally are the ends of designers across the world. When they're finished, they ship it out to the third world countries, and we get it and we work with it. So for us to take that and export it, it's a little bit tricky. So when we create our own fabrics, it's even better. A few years ago on Mission Catwalk, we allowed designers to create their own fabrics as well, just like they did on Project Runway. And it was phenomenal what the designers came up with. And that fabric was printed locally. And it was through HB Riley on North Street, I think. And they have the machine to print yards of fabric. And that's where we had it done. And we still, till today, we have requests for persons who want, fabrics that are unique for their clothing. And we will do custom fabrics for some of our customers.
What's the name of that company that printed the fabric? What's the name of it?
HB Riley, HB Riley.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
There are other companies as well. And it's just, we just need to have more, because part of the reason when they reached out to us, they were just going into that and they wanted to know if it was viable, if there would be enough designers to support this. And I don't know if they've had it, because it at the time when they launched, it was pretty expensive. So when a customer wanted a special fabric, or a designer wanted to work with a special fabric for a collection, it turned out to be very expensive. So I think they would have to have a larger market of designers buying from them in order for the cost per unit to reduce. And that's just another part of building the ecosystem to support the industry, whether it's the batik, whether we're printing by hand or so forth, or whether we're printing by machines. We just need to have that. There are companies overseas who are looking into and have reached out to me for support in terms of end-to-end manufacturing, where they want to, whether it's producing leather or from the cow to the actual finished product, they don't want to import anything. They want to do everything from Jamaica. In terms of fabrics, there are other, we lost out on Sea Island cotton, where we were growing the cotton and losing in terms of the value added that we could really make from Sea Island cotton. And we need to learn from that mistake and not let it happen to us with other fabrics that we can possibly produce. So when you look at the fact that we grow bananas in Jamaica, and every time a banana shoots, they chop that tree down, and that entire bark, when I pass and I see them chopping the trees and they're just chopping it into small pieces, I'm thinking that's a lot of fiber going to waste. And it literally just rots back into the soil. So those tall banana trees, that's actual fabric that we could have been using for textiles, whether it's for rugs or like weaving bags or so forth. It's a lot of raw material we're wasting. When I was going to Africa recently for Rwanda Fashion Week, I wanted to bring fish leather bags, and I went downtown. And there is a particular fish that the skin is very tough and leathery, and they skin the fish and throw the skin away. And I said to them, listen, I need that skin. I can
Sure.
turn that into leather and make bags.
Expensive leather.
And there's so much in terms of the food and agriculture industry that we waste that could be reused and repurposed into actual raw material for garments or household products and so forth that we're not even considering, because guess what? It's so easy to import it. But then we have people sitting down who are not working, or sitting on the roadside smoking weed and just not doing anything with their lives, who could be, you know, involved in this kind of manufacturing industry or creating raw materials that we could export. Because trust me, there are so many companies now who are actively searching for sustainable options, whether it's eco fashion and, you know, circular fashion, conscious fashion. If I announce on social media that we have a factory in Jamaica that's producing material from banana trunks, we wouldn't have hands to sell, because that's where the industry is going. All of these society women in London and New York, they want, when you come in their living room, they can say, this cushion is made from bananas from Jamaica. They love it. And we need to capitalize on that and sell that. At the end of the day, we can capitalize on that. We can't just sit and say, okay, we can just export from Cambodia or wherever. We don't need to do that. When we are a brand in ourselves that people can feel attached to and be a part of a conversation at a cocktail party at the end of the day. And we need to capitalize on that. End to end, we need to figure out how we can create our own raw material, create our products and export it. It is not difficult. When you look at story and myth beads that I brought to Africa, absolutely fantastic. Job tears. I have customers with, I have beads that are imported beads. And you have the Job tears beads, and people prefer the Job tears blessing beads over those imported beads.
Of course.
Hands down, because there's a story behind it. They know it's made in Jamaica by disabled persons. They know that money is going towards helping a family. It's not just imported and, you know, clear off of the wharf and gone into a shop to sell. You know, it's just buy and sell. No, there's no soul in buying and selling. Who cares? Who cares? People want something that they can feel attached to nowadays. And when I brought Beanie Bud bags with me to Africa, at the end of the day, people were fascinated that, oh, so this was woven in Jamaica, and they like that and they want it because they know where it came from and there's a story behind it, and they can connect with that. You know, when they go out and they wear it, they can say, yes, this bag was woven in Jamaica. Yes, by ladies. And, you know, they don't have to wonder when somebody asks them about the bag, if, well, maybe it was, you know, in some factory in Bangladesh where, you know, they have child labor or something, and you don't even know. You can't vouch for it. But if it is made in Jamaica, we're not a large exporter, so you know if it's made here. It's no black market. You can trace end to end where it is actually sourced.
Absolutely. And that is our competitive advantage.
Yes,
That is it. And what we do, we leverage the strength, and you're saying, Kenya, leverage the strength of our brand Jamaica.
Exactly.
Ask Andrew, that's what Grace Kennedy has been doing for me.
You think Grace Kennedy could have shut down shop and import Heinz and all those different things long time? But no,
Andrew Clark, the general manager for Grace Food Processors, the Kennedy division. Not only is he vice president, and I can never forget Jimmy Masalman, many years ago, came to a function that we were hosting, and he was the guest speaker, and he made the point that he said Grace Kennedy has stopped selling products years ago. We sell a brand, you know what I mean? And it's straight on the strength of the brand. Now, so Andrew?
Yeah.
No, it's definitely a brand, and it's a brand that Grace Kennedy spends a lot of time growing exports and having individual products that can meet different diasporas around the world. And it's down to the individual products that we manufacture in Jamaica. And our goal right now is that 50% of what we manufactured is exported. And it's a huge way of building Jamaica. Earning foreign currency through exports is incredibly important for the economy and sustaining the peoples of Jamaica.
Yeah. But isn't that our same competitive advantage in our agriculture and agro products, agro-based industries, is the strength of brand Jamaica. When we had a major cut in our agriculture. Well, agriculture was in crisis in 2020 for two reasons. One, because of the hurricane that we had, and two, because of our major market, which is the tourism industry, shut down. But when tourists come to Jamaica, which is a form of export, by the way,
Of course.
they want local products and quality local products. That's what I think.
That is true. That is quite true. And in terms of tourism, you'll see the shift that happened during COVID, where many persons, well, locally at least, realized that we never had to go outside of Jamaica to take our vacation. So that does change things totally. That dynamic was never explored in that way before. The other point that I would add is that using the example, I'm just going to use this as a living example now that we're working through in this dialogue. If it is that we are going to build backwards from what Kenya just outlined, how then do we reach our entrepreneurs? How do you find the labor that you need for building out this kind of market? And totally exhausting this opportunity. Where do you find the young people to train? Or at least one person online, I think, is from the education sector.
Right.
How many other schools would be interested? There are associations involved in this conversation this afternoon. How many of the associations can now have a discussion with their members to say, listen, how about if we take a slightly different approach and start supporting a particular industry? Let's choose one. Let's stop trying to do everything and being all things to all men, which is one of the things that Andrew said at the opening, that we need to identify maybe one or two particular products and then say we're going to focus on this for the next 10 years and see where that takes us. So if we're doing the banana trash bags or the bark, using the bark from the banana trees, I remember growing up in Manchester where there were hillsides of banana. Hillsides upon hillsides of banana. When you drive through some areas now, they're not there anymore. So it is a deliberate decision that we would now need to take and to start working backwards and building that pipeline and building the value chain that we've been talking about. There's something too that was said in terms of traceability. That's really, really important. I was a part of the cocoa industry activities years ago, looking at resuscitating cocoa in Jamaica. And the conversation was, if the cocoa bean that is exported from Jamaica finds its way into a chocolate in Switzerland, for argument's sake, and God forbid, someone gets sick from it, they need to be able to trace it right back to where the cocoa base. Exactly. Which hillside in Jamaica was it planted? How was it gathered?
We don't have that.
Precisely. So that entire pipeline. So when you think of agriculture, it's not just agriculture that you're thinking about. You're going into the food industry. And it could easily have been a chocolate that is put on someone's pillow in whichever hotel chain here in Jamaica. Yeah. So that traceability is not foreign to us. It's not outside of Jamaica. We need to think it happens here too. So we need to be able to trace what it is that we're eating. Where is it coming from? How is it handled? What are the standards to which the food or the product is being produced? That understanding must come across in the education of our people. Our farmers, yes. And that is when a farmer is not just growing some cocoa trees on just on a lark. It is an actual business, it's not a hobby. So all these conversations now need to come together and we need to streamline them to say, here is what it could look like. One, and two, this is what would be required. Because someone may now choose to become a seamstress at 25 years old and say, this is going to be my career. I teach career development at Mona School of Business. I do not have any student in my class that wants to be a seamstress. Sorry, Kenya. I'm so sorry about that.
It's not sold.
Because it's not sold as important. There is no value placed on it. When I
was in high school, there was no value on it.
There you
just
go.
happened on
It
it.
was, it was called extracurricular activity, don't it?
Exactly. That's extracurricular.
Yeah, the sports.
That's the
So
problem. So
it's
if you
deliberate
can't do maths
learning.
and so on, you go to that.
Precisely. You know, so it's sitting down with our educators and saying, okay, now, so we need to take a slightly different approach. And here's the outcome that we are
sold
working
different.
towards. And as Ms. V just said, the story has to be sold differently.
I think thanks for that timely introduction. Listen, I think the story really is from our conversation so far is about what our title for the session speaks about homegrown. What does homegrown mean? And how do we create around homegrown a viable proposition for business and eventually for the whole business of reducing the imports and increasing the exports. You know, Ms. V like to say that when we prepare a business at JBDC, a homegrown business, we don't prepare the business to trade in South, to trade in Savalamar, you know? No. Or Ochi for that matter, or Moran Bay. We got Moran Bay, by the way, a good place. A good place. We prepare the business to be internationally competitive. And that's important. And to be able to trade globally, to be able to stand up. As a matter of fact, you don't even need to go foreign for be trading globally. All you need to do is go to Los Ocean where Ms. V shop. For instance, Andrea and I shop at Hilo, but Ms. V shop at Los Ocean and company. You know, careful Ms. V, it's Grace Hilo. So yeah. But the point is that when you enter any supermarket shelf like that, to be able to compete really on a local supermarket shelf, you have to be at a standard of international acceptance. And your branding has to be as such, your quality of the product has to be such. So when we say homegrown don't mean Bakawal. No. Homegrown don't mean lower, inferior. Homegrown don't mean affirmative action.
And low quality.
Homegrown means being able to produce a business, to develop a business that is resilient, internationally competitive. No matter what business it is, as Andrew rightly points out earlier, as an entrepreneur, you decide on what makes sense for you and you pursue it accordingly. But homegrown also means, and I guess the point that Esli has been making, that you have to also have the infrastructure around you to support it. Yes. And that is what we also will continue to have that conversation with the policymakers, with the powers that be, to make sure that that ecosystem comes together. But we as entrepreneurs have a responsibility to understand the value of homegrown and what that means, you know, and homegrown. To accept that that means international quality, your branding, your product quality, your specs, your way in which you produce it, your supply chain management, your value chain input and that type of thing has to be to international standards. That's what homegrown means. And that's how we'll be able to ultimately reduce our imports and increase our exports. Going once, going twice, going 3 times. Anybody who has any comment or any contribution or any question? If not, while I remind you to fill out the feedback survey that's online, I'm going to ask each of our panelists to give their final thoughts as we wrap. So going once, going twice, going 3 times. Any comments, any thoughts that anyone wants to add at this time?
Yes.
Yes.
There are 2 elephants in the room that I think I touched one, but I didn't touch the other. One having to do with the cost of energy, right, and the other having to do with predator larceny and crime. So we can build all these lovely things. I think I hinted at it earlier, talk through all the things that we want to do. But as we said, when you plant the 1/4 acre of sweet pepper you know, are you reaping the quarter acre or do you
Or just
only
reap
reap
one
a
pepper.
pepper? So I really want to put that on the table to say the conversation as to how we go forward must include not so much what you'd call a crime plan. Actually scribbled it down somewhere here. Is really talking about citizen security plan and helping all our people who are going to be involved. I'm choosing my words very carefully. All our people who are going to be involved in the fashion industry, in pushing the fashion industry to understand their role in securing that fashion industry, for argument's sake. Or if we're supporting the export of foods through our Grace Kennedy, then it's all of us who have a part to play. And as Kenya said a while ago, talking to our youth and saying, listen, you can have a career here, and here's what it looks like. Not just rubbing out your hand middle on a corner, right? But selling that idea to our youth to say there are opportunities here, yeah? I know we can't touch the whole issue of predial larceny and how that will impact each industry, but it has to be something that JBDC looks at in a very strong way. Because if all our entrepreneurs are affected by this, then it can't go unsaid.
Yeah.
The last thing I'd point out and put an offer on the table really is to engage the association. So like Wency, how can we support the fashion industry or the food industry even more than we do currently? And putting some structure around it, not just having an association that helps our women to grow their businesses in isolation, but how do we come together as a group and put that forward as an opportunity to a Designers Guild or to a Grace Kennedy? How can we put that forward?
Yeah. Great. Thanks much, Ethne. Andrew, what are your any final thoughts that you have?
Well, I think Ethne's point is incredibly important in terms of predial larceny in agriculture and farming. The pressures there, I think, are different than the predial larceny that you'll find in food manufacturing or in other manufacturing industries that are in a more closed environment. But as a cattle farmer myself, we lose a percentage of the herd every year. And if you try and grow corn in the middle of St. Anne, you lose corn to predial larceny every crop. And I think that for the agricultural industry, we do need a stronger set of regulations and let's say better enforcement of predial larceny policies for farming. Closing for manufacturing from JMA side, again, use the local resources that you have to assist in helping you develop your products, your market, allowing you to be compliant in international markets. As entrepreneurs, there's a huge value in the Jamaican brand and hitting the diaspora. And as you grow in a company like a Grace Kennedy, you recognize more and more that you actually need to have customers that are not specifically for Jamaican diaspora product. So a Grace Kennedy now, through the life cycle of growth of manufacturing exports, is now moving to say, how can we have products that the world will buy manufactured in Jamaica? And in 20 years and 30 years and 40 years, there are going to be entrepreneurs that are probably sitting in this meeting that are probably $2 and $3 billion businesses with the same problems that we're all having today. And I think that the dream is a reality. Entrepreneurs create, or they're the engine of growth in an economy, and we have to support the entrepreneurs, whichever direction they feel that there's an opportunity to grow. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, man. Thank you so much, Andrew. Before Kenya and probably come back to Ethne for her last thoughts. In the chat, is that Sheena
Brown.
I check my eyes here because we got glasses thing, right? With JBDC man going into the schools, finding creative ways to make it attractive to students. We do, perhaps we could do more, but we do what we do a lot at the tertiary level. In terms of the support that we provide at a tertiary level. But I believe personally, and you go on to say that so that going forward, Jamaicans can be reminded, I guess you mean, that banana can make clothes, that also students may find clothes making as an appealing way of building themselves as well as Jamaica. And I agree with you. I was just about to, the last comment that you put in the chat there, we should start at high school. I believe we should start before that. I don't know how much of you remember, well, maybe I'm dating myself, but we used to have in our primary school, what we used to call it again? No, man, we're close to text man. 4-H club? 4-H club. 4-H club we had, but not 4-H club alone. We used to have a thing where we used to encourage trading, junior achievement. Yeah, and we encourage trading and building the entrepreneurial spirit. We need to start from early. We need to start from early. I believe that, and that's part of the ecosystem that we're talking about. But there needs to be an ecosystem around the recognition of the power and strength of Brand Jamaica as well, and that deliberate effort for us to be inculcating that in the minds of our youth growing up, so that they understand that banana fiber and banana material made or a particular unique design inspired by the maroons type of thing coming out has power, has strength. They understand that in carrying the beads, as Kenya says, from Jamaica, and just saying that it is produced by a cottage industry, whatever it is, in the hills of St. Mary, whatever it is, that has so much profound brand strength. I don't think our young people in particular, I know young youth, I mean young, teenagers and so on, the Zoomers appreciate, and it's our fault, appreciate the substantive value of a Brand Jamaica and what we can bring to the table if it is that we leverage it properly. So we definitely agree with you. We need to start from early, and we need to bring in other educational industry sector, the Ministry of Education and so on, to make sure that that happens in a change in the curriculum, actually, to inculcate these kind of thoughts, in our young person's minds. It's very important. So I agree with you. Kenia, over to you for your last thoughts.
Okay, so I do agree with you. We have to start much younger. We have to get our children involved in understanding, industries and how we have to craft end-to-end involvement from their young. Because I started sewing when I was 9 years old. That was grade 3. And nobody taught me. I didn't learn this at school. I just taught myself. And if I had the drive to do that at age 9, I'm sure if children are being taught that, they would definitely pursue. And if they can see where it's viable. For my entire time in high school, I was not told that fashion was a viable industry. It wasn't taught. I ended up studying philosophy in university. It happened by accident. And it was as an adult that I actually went to fashion school in London and did anything on my own. So we need to start from much younger, because this next generation, they are the ones who are going to hand the baton, because at the end of the day, right now, in terms of the fashion industry, we are running on zero, because we are contributing so much pollution and so much of the environmental issues that we're having today. Like, for instance, 92 million tons of textile waste ends up in landfills every year because of the fashion industry and because of consumers. So we need to look at our own selves as consumers, and we need to look at, sorry, I think I had a call coming in. We need to look at ourselves as consumers and see how it is that we are contributing to this problem of overconsumption and waste production in the world. And it's not sustainable. And this next generation has to focus on sustainability, sustainable fashion, end to end. They need to design with the end in mind. How are you going to dispose of this garment that you are designing? Is it going to end up in a landfill? Is it going to take 10,000 years to disintegrate? If we are working with natural fibers like banana and pineapple and cotton and so forth, this will easily be taken care of by nature. But when you're working with polyester and other materials that will take hundreds of years to disintegrate, we have to consider that. And our young people coming up, they have to think about the future of the planet. And that's why, as she mentioned about, as Ethne mentioned about energy issues, we have to focus on that as well. And that's part of sustainability. We can't afford the high energy rates, and we have to decide if we're going to bite the bullet and just invest in a green, clean factory that works on green energy. So we have a carbon neutral fashion industry in Jamaica. And if we can sell that this is a carbon neutral industry in Jamaica, that is gold right there for us, because a number of companies want to partner with factories that are green and carbon neutral. And we can achieve that. We have sunlight, we have wind, we can use wind energy, we can use solar energy, but it takes investment. And we're gonna have to have policymakers and the government saying, for any fashion designer who wants, investment for green, clean energy, we are giving this amount of money. Because I would love to convert to green energy, but I can't afford the initial investment. But there's so much potential if we are to invest in green, clean energy. And in terms of the last thing I'd like to say is about investing in training. We have to do a large scale investing in training. And, for years, I always said to designers who were looking to the government saying, the government needs to do this, the government needs to do that. When you look at Armani and all these other designers, they didn't wait on the government, they did it themselves. And that's why we started the Designers Guild. And that's why designers have tried to invest in the industry and try to invest in their own businesses. And we did that large scale training program, and it's not hard to find people to train. And what we found is if you're doing a training program and people have to pay upfront, they're going to hesitate because they don't know how viable the industry is and if they're going to be able to get a job afterwards. So they're hesitant. And what we did a large scale training program where we didn't charge a fee for the training. So it was a free training program. And we also gave them a stipend for transportation, so they weren't out of pocket to get to the training. And we saw where the attendance rate was much, much higher. We had almost 100% attendance rate every single day, because they didn't have to worry about taxi fare to get there, and the training was free. And the only problem with that is in terms of retaining the persons was difficult, because some of them went back and just work in their own businesses. So we didn't retain a lot of the skilled persons that we trained. And now we're going to revamp that and start again with JBDC. And I think we just need to do a large scale training program where we just flood the market with trained, skilled personnel that designers can say, yes, if I put out an ad for a seamstress, I will get one. The last time, I think Mark Anthony put out an ad for a tailor, and he put seamstress in the ad. And somebody called asking, what's a seamstress?
Of course.
So at the end of the day, we just need people out there, they're looking for work. They're looking for something to do. Not everybody can answer phone in a call center. They don't have the voice. They want to sit down and work with their hands. So, and there's so much more. It's so much more fulfilling when you create something, and at the end of the day, you can look at what you created. My seamstresses are so fulfilled when they look at page 2 and they see a dress that they made. It is so fulfilling when you adjust a garment for a lady and she sends a nice little thank you note, how beautiful she felt. And that connection with the customer is so important. And it's not everybody can get that when somebody cussing you off on a phone, on a call center for them phone bill and whatever. Not everybody wants to do that. People want to do something that's meaningful, that they can touch and feel. And there are different people out there who want different jobs, and we just need to put it out there, and people will come for it. Because when we announced the training, and I thought I would have gotten a few calls. We had 350 people signed up for training, and we were only able to train 80 of those people. So there are still more people. And if we were to do a full-scale proper advertisement, because that was just a little quick shout out, we're looking for persons to train, call this number. 350 people called. We didn't even have hands to answer the phone that day. So people are out there desperate for something to do, and they want the training. And if it's free, they will come. they will definitely come. So I thank JBDC for this, and I thank you for partnering with us. I'm looking forward to this training program coming up. And hopefully this will help to revive the industry, because without the trained personnel, we can't go anywhere.
Yeah, definitely. Any one
Final comments? Based on that lovely story that Kenya just shared with us, two things I would suggest to help with the 350 down to 80 trained, and then you had less persons actually staying with you, is doing bonding of persons to continue working with you, one, and to do them in rotation. So you have, more persons coming in as persons go out. As we wrap up the conversation, I made 3 quick points. One, for this great story that we just told this evening, the first thing we actually do need to do as a takeaway or going forward is to pick future forward industries that as a country we want to invest in, one, and two, it will stimulate our manufacturers, it will stimulate those of us who are entrepreneurs. 2, I mentioned 2 already. 3, backward integration. We've been talking it all afternoon. Backward integrate to create the pipelines that we actually need for the respective industries. And the last thing I'll mention, as you said, education, is to not only have us have this conversation at this table, but to involve the persons who are the educators as well. It is said that creativity is an import-export business. We've proven that this evening. Creativity is an export and import business. The conversation today confirms that there's a need for us to be more creative. And the model, the ecosystem that we all are a part of, the model needs some tweaks, as we've highlighted, that we need to increase, for example, our data banks or seed banks. We need to explore alternate careers and to promote those careers a little bit more. And there's clearly a need to support the sector even more. And this includes understanding the use of technology and promoting the use of technology in turning banana bark into a purse. Thank you so much for having us and for involving the Women Entrepreneurs Network of the Caribbean, and to say that we would like to actually partner a little bit more closely with JBDC and also Kenya with the fashion industry and with Grace Kennedy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for attending. I mean, by the way, Kenya, you the last comment big up say we like one persons like you, Kenya, with all her elegance would be an ideal person to go into the high schools to introduce these things to the students. So there you go, you get spokesperson work. You get ambassador work.
I'm glad you joined the team.
Yeah, so thank you so much, all of you, for attending this afternoon. It has been fabulous. Thank you, Andrew Wirelish.
Thank you.
Vice President of JMEA. Thank you, Kenya. Thank you, Ethne, for being here with us as always and sharing with us. Andrew, rest assured that JBDC once you become a JBDC partner, and I ain't that now. Don't stop calling them and tell them I know what happened to them. But certainly it has been a pleasure having you guys here as our panelists and having you all in the room. So on behalf of the production team, that's our corporate communications team and our IT team, big up to all of you who have joined us on Facebook as well. We have to recognize you. This production will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel, perhaps by the end of this week, Sansia, thereabout. All right, good stuff. So if you didn't catch all of it, or if you want to recommend it to a friend, just tell them to check out our YouTube channel on Friday thereafter. Or the evaluation form, I not think you did that already. I'm not fill out the evaluation form yet. We need to fill out the evaluation form because we want to know how, what you thought about the session, how we can tweak it for better next time and so on. So do that. But my name is Harold Davis. On behalf of all of us here, I want to wish you a productive afternoon, and rain or fall, bus strike and them things, but God is good and life is good. So thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and having yourselves a great afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having